what I think is always interesting about Outbound is that you really get to talk to the speakers while you're there. Because you're always, nobody's hiding it behind in a green room, nobody's avoiding people. There's workshops, there's all this dialogue. And I've found myself many times during the Outbound events doing a lot of consulting in the hallways because people are like, Victor, I have this problem. Okay, well, tell me what it is. Now, in that scenario, everybody, we have like I don't want to say a kumbaya culture when we're there at Outbound, but it's a kumbaya culture, right? You can go up to people, you can ask them, if you have an issue, well, let's talk about it. In some of the workshop, let's talk about it. To me, that's where the real value is. You're going to meet the speakers, but you're also going to meet other people who are probably in your business or business niche, or maybe have similar problems. It's not so much the content, that's always going to be at another level. But I think it's just the conversations that happen in the hallway, the one-on-ones. That to me is the value of flying out there.
All right, welcome to the Sales Gravy Podcast. I'm Jeb Blount Jr. filling in for Jeb Blount Sr. We've got Victor Antonio in the house today. Thank you so much for joining the podcast, man.
JBJ, always a pleasure, man. Always a pleasure.
And before we get started, I just want to plug a couple of books here. We got Sales Ex Machina, which is Victor's book that he co-wrote. The first book on sales and how AI is changing the selling world. And then we've got The AI Edge by Jeb and Anthony Iannarino. So we got 4 authors on the table here. So if you're interested in anything about the AI world and selling and how to utilize it for creating a more efficient pipeline for your prospects and for your sales pipeline, go check out Sales Ex Machina and The AI Edge. And Victor, I guess I want to start there a little bit. You've been a forerunner in AI and selling. And I know that you have had several conversations with Jeb on the podcast here. What have you noticed as a dynamic that maybe you weren't expecting before AI really hit full tilt going into this year?
When we wrote Sales Ex Machina, by the way, I started in with AI back in. I'm dating myself, JBJ. You'll love this. In 1987, I was working for Honeywell on the torpedo system. They had what they call an expert-based, rule-based system, which was a sort of an AI pre-machine learning. When we wrote the book, Dr. James Anderson and I, who I met at Honeywell, was my mentor. When we wrote that book, we wrote it in 2017, published it in 2018. Now, what's interesting about that is that in 2018, the paper by Google was written, Attention is All You Need. Now, for those who don't know what that paper means, that was the launching point for the development of the algorithms for ChatGPT, or all the GPTs out there. So as soon as we published that book, that was the year the paper came out, which basically gave birth to the GPTs. What I did not expect, and I didn't talk about in the book, is how fast this thing accelerated in terms of the natural language processing and understanding. In other words, the ability to understand verbiage and then generate verbiage. And so that has been quite astounding. And I think the thing I tell people today is that who don't believe AI is a powerful force, it really is. I think this is like the meteor, the dinosaur meteor. And I think people don't understand. This is bigger than the internet. This is so big. And I'll end with this by saying our brains are linear thinking machines. In other words, if I invest 2x, I expect 2x more. If I invest 4x, I expect 4x more. The problem with that is that AI is exponential. So we're trying to apply linear thinking to an exponential model. And in the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to witness dramatic changes in all aspects of business.
And so I guess as a seller, someone who is on the ground, boots on the ground, going after new potential prospects and closing business, what are some key takeaways that you just need to understand as we move into the future?
I think people should buy the AI Edge because it has more tactical tools than I wrote about in Sales Ex Machina. And it's also more up to date. So if I were to suggest both books, I'd like to suggest mine, but I would buy the AI Edge because of some of the content that's in there that's for today. And the reason I'm saying that is because I think as sellers, we have a short window, like 2 to 3 years, to really leverage AI. So it's first mover advantage in this case. In other words, get in there, learn how to use the tools, capitalize. We don't know what 3 years is going to be with AI, but I do know that those who leverage the tools today are the ones that are going to be winning. And I think it was, the guy from Diffusion, the CEO from Diffusion AI, that said, AI won't replace you. people who use AI will replace you. And we should kind of listen to that.
Yeah, there's a quote that Jeb has in many books, and it's all around. There are two kinds of people in the world: those that will be told what to do by computers, and those that tell computers what to do. And
Yep.
that is more relevant than ever in this day and age. One of the challenges with as a seller with AI is you are you're able to move a lot faster, but I know
Mhm.
one thing that you talk about is you're being inserted deeper into the sales process. And
Right.
so how can sellers and sales managers and sales leaders help their team utilize the human skill later on in the process when there's a lot more being done by AI to get leads into the program, get sales pipeline robust, or even just help buyers understand the product or the service to a higher degree. What are you teaching people that helps them win more when they're not running the process from soup to nuts?
That's a big question, by the way. I'll try to answer it this way. We look at AI, we always talk about sales enablement tools, right? Everybody has like, I don't know, 10 to 15, whatever technologies in their tech stack. But AI is a buyer enablement tool. I look at it from that side. So if you look at a coin, you got sales enablement, it'll help salespeople get better. But nobody talks about the buyer enablement piece, how it'll allow the buyer to do more research on their own. Having said that, I wrote an article called The Last Mile Seller. And that is that buyers will try to go as far as they can along the buying journey without talking to people, right? But eventually, especially if it's a complex sale or something that has a lot of nuance to it, they're going to reach out to salespeople. And the salespeople have to be, I'll go back to Mac Hannon, and I know Anthony Narino would agree with me on this. Mac Hannon talked about the trusted advisor. I think we're going to get a lot more of that. In terms of reaching out, what we're going to discover is that if you actually pick up the phone and actually call on customers, whether it's physically, virtually, I think those folks are also going to gain the advantage. What you're seeing today in the market is a lot of people, you've seen this, JBJ, a lot of people hide behind the technology instead of reaching out. And I think your father just says, pick up the damn phone and call. And I think we need to get back to some of that. And I think those who do that can kind of, I'll say, use old technology with new technology, get on the phone, but use the AI tools to be more efficient. Those are the winners of the game.
I love it. Okay, so one of the reasons that we have you on the podcast is that you are an incredible speaker, and in Jeb Blunt's own words, the best speaker in sales. You just have an incredible presence on stage. So we have you coming to Outbound. Outbound Conference 2024 is in San Antonio, Texas, November 6th to the 8th. If you haven't got tickets, go to outboundconference.com. What are you going to be focusing on? Because that conference is all about productivity, pipeline, and prospecting for sellers. And we have the vision that people walk away with an intense boot camp on what to
Mhm,
do in 2025 and the end of 2024 and feeling energy. You have a
mhm.
few sessions, you have several keynotes. I don't want you to give away everything, but what are you
Okay.
focusing on to help people with maybe their mindset? And that's something that I know you have on your mind is how can people end the year strong and go into 2025 with a little bit more energy?
I have two topics. One is mindset, and the other one is how do you accelerate pipeline? And both have one thing in common, and that is friction. I'm an engineer by trade, so I love the word. I've always been fascinated by friction. I remember my first science experiment was sliding a block down some incline, and you had to measure the coefficient of friction with different types of you know uh, barriers. And what was interesting was that if you think about mindset, when I talk to people, I can always see what's holding them back. So I try to figure out what's the friction in your mind holding you back. Something as simple as why do you hesitate to pick up the phone? What is the mental friction stopping you from doing that? So I'm going to talk about how do you get rid of that friction in your mind or even friction just in general to take action. In the other session, when we talk about pipeline velocity, I'm going to talk about how you help the customer reduce the friction from taking a decision or making a decision. And it's really fascinating because when you look at it from a friction standpoint, everything we do is trying to overcome friction.
Hmm.
Before we get on this podcast, there's a lot of friction you have to overcome from your side, right? You have to schedule things, make the call, schedule it. And even as we turn on everything, right? Turn on the TVs, whatever, the monitors, the cameras, all this is friction. And the more you can reduce the friction, which is why we create great workflows, the more likely we are to take action. So anyway, I'll be talking about mental friction and also why clients hold back and don't make a buying decision and what you can do to reduce that friction.
So, give us a little teaser, friction, and let's talk about it from the seller perspective. I know you have,
Mhm.
I've read several articles you just put out through your newsletter that is awesome, by the way. So go sign up for Victor's newsletter. What are some frictions that most sellers have that can easily be solved uh, by some mindset changes?
Here's the most recent one. And I haven't written an article on this, but I just keep running into this one. You tell me, JBJ, if you run into this also. So I'm dealing with, I'll just say a pest control company, a very large pest control company here in Atlanta. And one of the things, I did an interview with one of their top salespeople. And he said, Victor, my biggest problem was I had a price barrier. Now, I thought when he said I had a price barrier, is that because this company is more expensive, he was afraid to present pricing. But that wasn't it. He said, he clarified, he goes, no, I guess it's not a price barrier. He had what I call a pricing threshold in his mind that if he went beyond that pricing threshold, he thought he'd lose the deal. So,
Hmm.
in other words, he didn't want to, the customer would call him over to the house. He would review the house, termite issues, insulation issues, but he was trying to measure every time how much he should put on the table for the customer. And he realized over time that he was reducing the average deal size because his price point, his price threshold was, let's say, 5,000. Well, today he's successful. He says, my price threshold is 20,000. Said another way, too often when we're selling, we try to assume what the other person will say yes to or can afford, either one, right?
Hmm.
And when we do that, we almost superimpose this friction piece on us by saying, well, you know what, I'm just going to present this only, and I'm not going to, present the full Monty, so to speak. And fast forward to another story. Did a presentation for some orthodontists, teeth straightening, aligners, the whole bit. And I ran across the same thing that they didn't want to present too much to what the customer needed. In other words, you came in, JBJ, and I found $10,000 worth of problems that we need to fix. But because I either thought you couldn't afford it or I thought you couldn't buy it, I superimposed my belief on what I thought you could afford. I only suggested maybe $3,000 of that. And we talked about why do you do that? And it's because we're buying first with our own pockets,
Hmm.
right? Or number two, you don't really believe in the value of what you offer. And I pushed him on the value piece. I said, what do you mean you don't believe in the value? And I should say, I asked him, why don't you believe in the value of what you're offering? And what I found was very interesting. They saw the pricing as a transactional situation, quid pro quo this for that. I bid you 3,000, you get $3,000 worth of service. And I said, well, it's much more than that. For example, in the pest control industry, if I only bid $3,000 and I left seven on the table, that means that $7,000 worth of value I didn't give you. In other words, the salesperson had to understand that they weren't selling a quid pro quo. I'm protecting the owner's biggest asset, most likely, which is their home. And by adding that $7,000 differential, I am further protecting that asset of my client. But they weren't looking at it like that. They weren't thinking about the value of the asset they were protecting. They were more focused on what they thought was acceptable. Does that
Hmm.
make sense?
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And when I was in the field and selling telecommunications, this is one of the bigger challenges that you have, especially in like pest control or like a transaction. It feels transactional in its
Right.
nature, where you're walking into businesses or walking into homes and you're making a quote and they're hee hawing because it's a monthly expense or whatever that looks like. But what you're really doing is you're just shortchanging their business. You're shortchanging their assets. You're
Yes.
shortchanging them on the other side. And that is like one of the harder parts of being a seller, right? One of the harder parts of being a seller is looking at Victor Antonio and saying, I understand that your budget might allocate this much, but what I'm telling you is that if you don't invest X number of dollars, you're going to be worse off and you're going to call me in 3 months and you're going to wish you'd gotten it first.
Right.
And that's that's a challenge for a lot of sellers, and it's a challenge every single time you build a proposal. So that absolutely makes sense. What's another mindset challenge or another piece of friction
Mhm.
that that would get people to another level. Just take them from
Mm.
a B plus seller, someone who makes decent money to an A minus or an A plus seller.
All right, I'll give you a story with this one. This one, because this one is so powerful. So my office is downstairs, and there's a bathroom next door, right? And I heard this. I'm like, what is that? Right? So I go investigate, go to the bathroom, and I go by the sink, open up the cabinet doors under the sink, and I see this thing just dripping, like, right? And so I always joke, if you're a real man, what do? You go to the kitchen, you get a bowl, slide it underneath the thing, and then you tell your wife it's fixed, right? That whole thing, right? And over time, the drip got a little more frequent, right? So what do? You get a bigger bowl, right?
Yep.
That whole thing. And eventually you can't fit a 5-gallon bucket under there. So you got to face the reality of this thing. Long story short, I tell myself, I got to fix this thing. I don't want to call a plumber because it looks like a small job. I think I can do this, maybe. But again, I've been putting this off, and I said, okay, this Saturday morning, I'm doing it. So Friday, I go to Lowe's, I get all the PVC pipes, the elbows and everything. And then Saturday morning comes, I hit about 2 cups of coffee, easy, maybe 3, who knows, whatever courage I needed to get going on this thing, right? And so finally I said, okay, I'm going in, right? And boom, I go in. And it took me, JBJ, it took me like, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 7 on the outs to fix this thing. And I'm like, I'm done. It's fixed. I did, I put the napkin underneath, make sure there's no drip, called my wife over, said, look, it's fixed, that whole thing. And what do you think is the first question I asked myself after that successful, fix?
Why did it take so long?
Yeah. Like, why didn't I do this before? And here's the powerful piece. When I thought about it, is that in the past, every time I've dealt with plumbing, it was, first of all, it wasn't PVC. It was typically copper piping, and you had to solder some stuff, right? And I wasn't very good at it. And it never went really well for me. I bent a couple of pipes, messed up a couple of things. And so what happened was, JBJ, I brought back that memory from the past, and I bring that memory forward. And that memory is what stops me from going in. Because of my past experiences, I bring past experiences forward. And that just scares me from doing something. For example, I've talked to people who have cold call reluctance, right? Picking up the phone. And I'm sure that if I were to just sit them on the couch, right, and psychoanalyze them, what I'd find is they were yelled at when they were young when they interrupted somebody during a conversation. Wait your turn, adults are talking, stuff like that,
Hmm.
right? Or they see everything as an interruption. Somewhere along the way, maybe they had a bad cold call experience, and they bring that memory forward. And to them, it's all about interrupting people. Maybe they watch the Glenn Ross movie, ABC Always Be Closing, and they see themselves as a pusher of wares, right, pressuring people to buy. And what they're doing is they're bringing up past all these memories. All these past memories are being brought forward, and that's what's preventing people from doing the things they want. Because if you ask people, what's so, like for me in this case, what was so hard about doing that? I mean, I have an engineering degree. You think I could fix plumbing? No big deal. I should have just jumped on it. But what happens is every time I hesitated because of my past. So one of the things I ask myself now, this is an application for those watching or listening. If you find yourself hesitating to do something, maybe be in that moment, and ask yourself, well, why am I afraid? Like, what's the worst that could happen? How bad could this go? But more importantly, why am I afraid? Why am I afraid of doing something that most people can do? And you'd be amazed how you realize that what's really holding you back is some weird memory or memories that you're bringing forward, and your perceived fear, your imagined fear. I think that's the big part. You start to imagine things going wrong. And when people get before they get on the call, they imagine how bad it might be. And so again, that imagined fear, what I brought forward is what stopped me from actually doing something.
That is incredible advice. It happens. It happened to me this morning. Happened to me yesterday. Happened to me the day before. You have something that comes up in your day, and you have a bad memory, and you're projecting that future outcome from something that happened in the past that's already over. And it's
You
it.
give me an example now. Give me your example. I love to hear one of your examples.
Well, so you get an email from a customer that had a maybe something went wrong in their service, and instead of answering that, and just jumping on it because I got yelled at in the past. For whatever reason,
Yeah.
you push that email off and you give it a day or give it a couple days. And when I this morning had someone that called me, I didn't pick up the phone. I saw the voicemail. I rolled my eyes and went, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to deal with this later. And I was feeling that exact same thing. And my mantra has always been like, screw it.
Right.
Like and that's why am I afraid of this? But it's hard to remember and it's hard to practice. And I'd
Yeah.
gotten out of a practice, but this morning I
Fine.
called the guy back and it was a perfectly fine conversation. Everything went well. We were able to explain everything, and we moved on completely normal. But I had to ask myself in that moment, why was I afraid? Why wouldn't I have just
Yeah. That
yeah.
imagined fear, right? That imagined fear. By the way, have you ever gotten like emails from somebody like you know them, right? Like they're an existing customer, past customer, and you don't open it? You ever do that?
Oh,
Do you do?
yes.
It's just me. I look at it and go, man, I'm not opening that. I'm not ready for whatever's in there.
And that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And had an email last night and just had that same thing. Just open it up. Like if you let it sit, it will only get worse.
Yeah, that by the way, a great point, right? Because it's like damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you open it, you might not like what's in there, but if you don't open it, your mind is just going, "What's in there?" And it just
Exactly.
keeps you up all night. Yeah, that's funny.
Exactly. So just open my advice is my mindset advice is just open it up, get it done
Do it.
now, rip the band-aid, prioritize, of course. But
Yes.
no, okay, so that was incredible advice. We've got you coming to Outbound. We're really excited to have you there. From your perspective, why should people come to Outbound?
The the content's going to be great. I mean, we have a group of people who are very smart. That's just the easiest way to put it. So let's just say the content level is going to be alrighty. So that's the easy part, right? To talk about. What I think is always interesting about Outbound is that you really get to talk to the speakers while you're there, because you're always, nobody's hiding it behind in a green room, nobody's avoiding people. There's workshops, there's all this dialogue, and I've found myself many times during the Outbound events doing a lot of consulting in the hallways because people are like, Victor, I have this problem. Okay, well, tell me what it is. Now, in that scenario, everybody we have like I don't want to say a kumbaya culture when we're there at Outbound, but it's a kumbaya culture, right? You can go up to people, you can ask them, if you have an issue, well, let's talk about it. In some of the workshop, let's talk about it. To me, that's where the real value is. You're going to meet the speakers, but you're also going to meet other people who are probably in your business or business niche, or maybe have similar problems. It's not so much the content, that's always going to be at another level. But I think it's just the conversations that happen in the hallway, the one-on-ones, that to me is the value of flying out there. And I've not been to this venue, but I heard based on what Jeff told me that it's more. I don't want to say isolated. It's not a good phrase for it, but tell me if I'm wrong, JBJ. But it's going to be a place where we're all going to kind of be together, and you can't really be scattered. So
Yes.
you can really interact with people.
Yes, absolutely. And this year's Outbound is going to be at the JW Marriott Resort in San Antonio. It's a
Yep.
bit outside the city. So what that means is that we have the resort is incredible. It has everything you need, and you're not so far away from the city that you couldn't go in there if you didn't want to. But what it means is that the group that comes to Outbound will be a group just like Victor talked about, like
Mm.
a come together as sales professionals with a similar challenges, similar industries, similar problems, similar successes, and with the people in the sales industry who know. Victor's going to be there who knows and can help. Jeb's going to be there who knows and can help. Anthony's going to be there. Amy Franco. We've got people who are Bryn Tillman. They are going to be there to help you because they have been there, done that, got the T-shirt, and you have chances to go speak with them. Whereas, in most cases, in most people who come to Outbound don't ever get that opportunity, and
Mm.
it's going to be an incredible event. So I can't wait to have you there, Victor. Is there anything you want to just say about Outbound before we get off the podcast that would hopefully we get you there because people who are listening to this podcast, it's the greatest sales show on earth.
I want you to go because I can't tell you how many informal conversations I've had by the pool while I'm trying to eat. You just run into people everywhere. And those type of conversations just don't happen. The fact that we're going to be kind of isolated on this little JW Marriott island, so to speak, is one of the biggest reasons to go. So you got Jeb and Anthony. I know they're going to talk about AI and other things. So you're going to get some, some really, I'll say some leading edge, information about what's going on in the market, what's changing. Other great speakers, not to minimize everybody else, but you got a bunch of other great speakers who are going to bring real content. I think that you guys have done a great job of curating the best of the best into one location. We've reduced the number of speakers, so it's going to be highly concentrated content. No fluff, maybe just my stories. That'll be a couple of fluffy stories I'll have for you. That's about it. But other than that, great content, great people. And I'll say this, there's something that changes in the dynamic of a relationship when you meet somebody face to face and you have a conversation. When you have a conversation with, let's say, Mark Hunter, after that event, it's like Mark Hunter. You're like, I'm not saying you're friends, but there's a familiarity there that you can't get at other events. And that to me is the biggest value point.
I absolutely agree. So if you haven't gotten tickets, it's outboundconference.com. That's outboundconference.com. November 6th through the 8th. It's in San Antonio at the JW Marriott. There's also a few events that are happening outside of the 6th to the 8th. So if you look at the ticket pricing, feel free to use the chat function on the website to ask our live agents about anything that's going on in San Antonio for Outbound Conference. Those tickets are available at outboundconference.com. Victor, thank you so much for joining us on the Sales Gravy podcast, and we appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, I'm doing a happy dance because you watched this video. Make sure that you click like and subscribe so that you never miss one of our amazing sales training videos.